If you've been keeping up with our channel, for the past 7 episodes, you've been hearing us repetitively say, the race for the championship is heating up. Oh, the battle for the championship is heating up. Well, that battle came to a grinding halt as in the Brazilian Grand Prix, Max takes victory and Lando falls to 6th, which makes a huge swing considering now Max has a 62-point lead. But we're going to get into that a little bit. This is Turn 1 Podcast. We're your hosts, Jeremiah
and Thomas.
And today's episode, we are covering the race for the championship.
Yeah, so let's start there at Sao Paulo, and then we'll go back to kind of the start of the year. And, you know, I did not take notes for this over every single race, so we're gonna kind of recap it by memory with what we were feeling and experiencing as the season went on. But Sao Paulo, again, mathematically, Lando can still win the championship. There's 3 races left. There's a sprint left in Qatar. So possible, but highly unlikely.
Yeah, anytime that you have to use the words mathematically before a statement, it's probably not going to happen. And the reality of the situation is we were talking about, Lando, if he wins outright and Max doesn't do so good, and then whatever happened, Max started doing really good, and it was like, if Max gets second in every race and Lando gets first in every race, and all of this, now it's kind of all up in the air. I mean, you really have to put a pencil and paper to it, but the bottom line is that this championship lead is not getting smaller anymore. It's getting bigger, and with only 3 races left to go and a 62-point deficit, I don't think Max really has to do much of anything for the rest of the season. And Lando pretty much has to win outright every sprint race, every regular race, fastest laps on all of them. And that just does not seem likely.
No, we'll probably cover on this. This is a little bit shorter of an episode probably, but we'll look at where Lando Norris's battle is probably for the final 3 races, which might very well be with Charles Leclerc, who's only
27.
A handful. How many points?
27.
27. Double
24?
check that.
24?
Yeah, 24.
24.
I was looking at that and I'm like, I don't think that adds up to 27.
No, it's 24. My bad.
So the battle might be there if Charles has been doing well, but we'll get into that in a little bit. I'm also going to plug ahead, check in later, a couple days from now, where we release an episode describing the constructor battle, which is still very much alive over the last 3 races of the season. Definitely 2 teams in contention, possibly 3 teams in contention for that constructors race. Going back to the start of the 2024 season, though, for the Drivers' Champion specifically, honestly, looked like Max was going to run away with it again. It looked like a repeat of 2023 minus Sergio dominance.
On the street races.
Because here's how Max starts. Max starts first, retired, first, second, sixth, first.
Yeah,
it's pretty good.
Kind of hard to argue with that one.
When you win more than half of the first 10 races of the year, no one's even contention. And McLaren, I mean, they were doing fine, but they weren't anywhere near how they finished the season. Lando goes 6, 8, 3, 5, 2, 1, 2, 4, 2, 2. So definitely improved. That's the first 10 races of the year for both drivers. Definitely improving the back half, getting 4 second place finishes and his first race win ever there in Miami, but still nowhere near the points that Max had. But here's where I think there's 2 kind of game changers, and I want your thoughts on both of these. One, Lando winning in Miami was the confidence boost that dude needed to just be propelled into the next level of an F1 driver.
Absolutely.
Let's start there.
Absolutely. So you're talking about a driver that regularly saw the podium, but never the first step. Everybody had all high hopes for. He went straight to McLaren out of Formula 2, which is one of the front-running teams, essentially, except for they weren't able to give him the car. Finally, they're able to give him a car. He gets his first win in Miami, and all of the confidence in the world surges into this man as he now goes from a Formula 1 driver to a Grand Prix champion. And with that, I mean, that means everything in the world to these guys because regardless of how many drivers you think have won a race, it's not as many as the total amount of drivers that have ever raced in the sport. It's actually a small percentage. And he now joins that upper echelon. And as he gets more wins and more wins and more wins, that'll propel him higher up that list. And his confidence should get higher. I want to use this as a little segment here because this is where things get a little bit rocky. Oscar Piastri winning that race, and what was it, like 2 or 3 races later?
Was it Hungary? It might have been a little bit more after that.
Where Lando Norris gets second, and they
Yep.
didn't give any kind of team orders whatsoever in favor of Lando, as all of the team orders went in favor of giving Oscar his first win. This was a huge problem, as for one, it did take a little bit of a sting out of Lando's bite, as now it seems like the team is no longer backing him for the World Drivers' Championship. But also, it takes a little hit to the confidence because one, it seemed like he could get the job done, but ultimately everything in the world was stopping him from it, including his own team. And so now you're looking at a situation where you have a number 2 driver who's also battling for this World Drivers' Championship, when in reality that shouldn't be the case at all, considering the points differential between Lando and Oscar up to this point was highly in favor of Lando, as he had done way better in the first half of the season. So it's real rocky at this point.
We talked about this when it was Hungary, I confirm, which was the 13th race this year. Um, it it felt at the time like every point was valuable, even though Lando still had a long way to go to catch Max. We were looking ahead, thinking McLaren's performance had changed, which we'll cover a little bit here. Red Bull's performance had fallen off of a cliff
Yeah.
at that point, and Lando is going to need every point to claw his way back up and catch Max. And I know now the gap is pretty large, but that's just because we finished a race where Max won and Lando got sixth or whatever.
Right.
If you give Lando those however many points, was it 6, 8 points, whatever it was, plus a fastest lap, maybe it could be different, and his attitude could be different, and his motivation could be different if he's a 4-time race winner instead of a 3-time race winner. I don't know.
Honestly, if Lando had finished second in the Brazilian Grand Prix and gotten the fastest lap, we'd be having a completely different discussion right now. But the
Right.
fact of the matter is, he finishes sixth.
So before we get into McLaren performance, which we I think need to talk about, the second game changer that I wanted to mention outside of Lando winning his first race, which was the sixth race of the year in Miami, going back to those first 10 races I gave you for both drivers. I gave you the first 10 races for a reason. After 10, we go to Austria, where Max gets fifth. And then we go to Silverstone over there in Britain, and he gets second. Okay, a little bit of a dry spell for Max. Then we go to Hungary, and he gets fifth. That's also where McLaren takes 1-2. Then we go to Belgium, and he gets fourth. Then we go to his home race, the Netherlands, where he gets second. That 11th race, which happened to just be Austria, his other home race, something happened, and Red Bull lost their domination of the 2024 season right there in that race.
I don't want to get too heavy into this conversation because I want to save it for the constructors talk in our next episode, so stay tuned for that. But I do want to give a little mention here in that this is where Red Bull finally realized that some of the upgrades that they brought might have been a problem, and they just didn't know it because Max was still winning races, so it didn't matter. But come to find out, it did matter, and now things aren't meshing the way that they should be as they bring more and more upgrades, and now they got to go backwards.
Yeah, they ended up taking parts off the car, going back to the original build, redesigning some of the upgrades that they did bring in. I don't know for sure, but maybe the last couple of races they've been rolling out small little upgrades, and that's why Max's performance overall has been improving. But McLaren, specifically Lando, Oscar's done well, but Lando's of course still been the number one in the clubhouse for McLaren. He took over after that 10th race. He
Yes.
starts going on a tear in the 12th race of the year, which was Hungary. He goes third, or sorry, 12th race, which was Britain. He goes third. Hungary second. Belgium fifth. Wins the Dutch Grand Prix. Podiums in Italy. Fourth in Azerbaijan. First in Singapore. It's not Max's win every other race, but that's better than every other driver was doing at the time, and better than Max Verstappen was doing at the time.
Exactly. And it's tough to see Lando falling back, but I mean we have more factors involved into this. So I kind of want to move on from this point. I don't know if your next point was going to be the mention of Leclerc's battle with Norris now as
It
we
can be,
further
yeah.
approach. Leclerc has been on a tear. He's got another victory in what was that? Austin. We went to that race, duh. Uh,
He, he was so far ahead of everybody else, we forgot about him.
I mean, essentially, yeah, because we would see him. Oh, there goes Leclerc. and then he'd go through the S's and then around the corner. Oh, and then comes everybody else.
Carlos.
So both Leclerc and Carlos, actually, and Ferrari in general, have been coming back strong. We haven't seen much from Mercedes, but Leclerc is essentially bringing this battle to Norris. As like we talked about earlier, is only 24 points back, with Leclerc being 62 points behind Max, and with Norris being 62 points behind Max and Leclerc only being 24 points back from Norris. We could very easily see this flip, and we could see Leclerc on top in second place and challenging Max for the top, which statistically that's not possible for Leclerc to do. But what we can see is him taking those points from Norris that Norris needs to catch Max.
Yeah, so Leclerc's last 9 races, we'll go back to Hungary for this. I'll just rattle off his finishing positions, and they mimic very closely the positions I just gave you for Lando Norris. 4th, 3rd, 3rd, 1st, 2nd, 5th, 1st, 3rd, 5th. That's about matching Lando minus Lando's win in Miami, which essentially is the difference at this point.
Yeah, and it definitely helps him also that he won in Monaco earlier in the season, in case anybody forgot that.
Yeah, it's hard to forget him winning his home Grand Prix.
And he's won Monaco, Monza, and Austin. That's 3 race wins for him this year.
To Lando's 4.
That's so crazy, man. This season.
Or does Lando only have 3?
Lando won Miami. I know that.
Lando's 3. Sorry.
He won Singapore, and then he won what was the third
Netherlands.
one? The Netherlands.
So they both have 3.
That's crazy. Oh gosh.
You know, again, going back to just when we started the season, there were a couple of things that we thought were for sure, which was that Max would kind of run away with it, because the 2023 season, if you don't remember or you weren't a part of that season or whatever, was the most dominant performance by a driver and a team we've ever seen. That was incredible. Like he won 19 races. What?
Yeah. That's
and
unreal.
Then he comes out this season basically doing the same thing. I did not think at this point, with 3 races left in the season, we would be talking about a McLaren sitting in a number 2 spot fighting for a championship, although not really fighting anymore, because McLaren didn't start off the season that hot. And then Charles Leclerc, who's had his ups and downs, his best season coming in 2022, but he's not been overly great because of Ferrari's other issues. As a driver, he's been fine, but they have strategy and other things. And then Oscar Piastri down there in 4th. Now, Oscar has no chance of winning anything, but still, I didn't see this season playing out this way at all. And also, did you think that we would have 3 races left before we're calling it for Max Verstappen?
Yeah. And on top of that, just think about how many drivers in general have won a race this year. I mean, we've seen Carlos Sainz win. We've seen Carlos Sainz, Lewis Hamilton, George Russell, Charles Leclerc, Oscar Piastri, Lando Norris, Max Verstappen. Am I missing one?
I don't think so.
Both McLarens, both Ferraris, both Mercedes, 1 Red Bull.
I think 7 drivers.
Yeah, and multiples. I think George has won 2, if I'm not mistaken. Lewis has won.
Lewis has 2.
Lewis has 2. Charles Leclerc.
George had.
That's
2.
right. He had 2, but now Lewis does.
But now Lewis does.
George has 1. Lewis has 2. Charles has 3. Carlos has 2 this year?
Yeah, Carlos won back in Australia, and he won Mexico.
He won Mexico, yeah. Yeah, so then Oscar Piastri also has 1 win, and then now you have Lando Norris with 3 wins. It's just a hodgepodge, and I love every second of it. I wish that this happened earlier in the season for everybody. I wish that Red Bull didn't start as strong, and we just had a 7-way battle for the championship, because that would be unreal viewing. And every single race would just be like, whoever wins now takes the lead in the championship.
I'll wrap up my part with this. I have a couple of things I'm looking forward to after this season. One, the battle between Max and Lando next year should be epic. Lando's now on the next tier of winning drivers. He's got multiple race wins. McLaren, is staying the same in terms of their team build and personnel and all that, so they should have a dominant car. That battle should be awesome. 2, how does Red Bull losing Newey affect their ability to produce a car for Max that is as competitive as it has been? That is yet to be seen.
I've got a potential play, and hear me out on this. I've been saving
Okay.
this for an episode, and I think with us talking Drivers' Championship and now us segueing to next year, I'll just throw this out there just for the fun of it. There's no way Sergio Perez has his spot next year. I mean, that's unrealistic by all means.
I mean, at the start of the season or like halfway through the season? Because he's got it at the start of the season.
It's terrible all around. Just awful. Get him out of there.
He will line up in Australia next year in a Red Bull.
Gosh, I hope not. Maybe halfway through the season he'll get a boot. Anyway, Christian Horner has been seen talking with James Vowles at Williams. Nobody knows what this is about, and James Vowles went on record saying that they got sponsored by, I think, some new dessert place, and that Christian Horner really wanted to try a cookie or something like that. But we all know that that's BS, man. There's no way. Here's what I think is going on. Here's what I think is going on, man. I think they are looking hard at Colapinto because Colapinto won't have a seat next year. I think you're going to see either Liam, Yuki, or I guess Daniel's a possibility, but I think it's going to be Liam.
No, he's not. Drop it. You're the only one.
I'm really not. Why don't you look at some speculation out there? Daniel's
the
name is
only
thrown
one.
around. Anyway, either Liam or Yuki takes the second spot in the Red Bull, and they bring Franco Colapinto on in the Red Bull B team. V car.
Yeah, I could see the Lawson or Yuki move up for sure. I mean, I would rather see Lawson than Yuki. I think Yuki's had long enough, but we can save that for another day. I have one more thing for you. My last thing I'm looking forward to.
Okay.
So we know Max doesn't really care about anything. I mean, he's said that he really doesn't. Like, he would quit F1 if it ever became boring, which it kind of seems like it is.
Sure.
I think next year, if Red Bull is uncompetitive, that could be Max Verstappen's last year. Because why does he care? He doesn't care. He's got all the money in the world. He's won championship.
Even with the regulation change the very next year after that?
Yeah, why does he want to deal with all that? I don't think it's going to happen. I think he'll be around. Let me be very clear. I think he's going to be here for several more years. But if they're just terrible and he sees no path to him winning another championship anytime soon, I think he could be out. 2, the Lando situation about his future. Dude, if they keep pushing the Oscar thing over him, he will leave.
I can't argue with that one. But I'll give you a counterpoint for Max.
Okay.
Ready for this? 2025 goes terrible, and it's clearly not his fault because whoever his teammate is, he's going to destroy because he's Max Verstappen.
Yep.
He leaves Red Bull, stays in the sport, and goes to a different team. Who that team is, I have no idea, and the likelihood of it being McLaren is slim to none because they still want Oscar Piastri to be the next guy. But man, if we saw him go to like Mercedes or Ferrari, I would lose my mind. You know, to this day, Total Wolf keeps on him at all times a contract for Max Verstappen to race for Mercedes. That's hilarious.
Would Lewis Hamilton race as a teammate with Max Verstappen?
At Ferrari? Charles Leclerc? Oh no! What are they going to do with him?
You're telling me okay, one, I would give Lewis the boot for Max in a Charles lineup, but let's say that you're old Fred Vasseur and you just really want the 2 most dominant drivers of this century on your team.
And that's a Ferrari move to make.
They wouldn't win anything probably, but it would look really cool.
No, there's no way they would win anything.
Having Max and Lewis, all their money's gone. They're paying them both $80 million a year.
Although if any team financially could pull it off, it would be Ferrari.
Okay, let us know. Is the battle now between Lando Norris and Charles Leclerc, 24-point gap? Who do you have coming out on top at the end of the season? Let us know.
Guys, if you think that Carlos Sainz still has a chance to be your 2024 World Drivers' Championship leader, you're wrong, statistically, but I would love to see it.
It's like asking if Lance Stroll has a chance.
Okay, well, no.
See ya.
Bye, guys.